maybe some doctors might be offended.
I think so.
Assalamu alaikum. Inshallah, before we begin with the Quran recitation, I just wanted to point out that, mashallah, our sponsor, Qisa Coffee, they brought the delicious coffee and tea for us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you, and thank you so much for sponsoring this particular event. We're grateful to have you participate in our program, and we look forward to, to enjoying more of your delicious hot drinks, mashallah. Inshallah, now Imam, soon to be Imam Adam, inshallah, he's going to begin with the Quran recitation, and we'll begin the program. Bismillah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وإن تبدوا ما في أنفسكم أو تخفوه يحاسبكم به الله فيغفر لمن يشاء ويعذب من يشاء والله على كل شيء قدير. آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كل آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. صدق الله العظيم.
Thank you so much, Brother Adam. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for being patient with us. We will get started, inshallah. Just a quick recap of the agenda. We'll go about till 7:30. We'll stop for prayer, and then we'll come back at around 8 o'clock for Q&A. We have a very intense discussion planned out for you guys. It will be fast-paced a little. I wanted to introduce our panelists and kind of just jump right in. So if you'll please hold your questions until the Q&A session, we'll get you right in and out. First person I'd like to introduce is our Shaykh Umer. He's based out of Los Angeles, Orange County area, kind enough to join us tonight. Shaykh is, very. We had to make sure we found and we brought to you a subject matter expert, both in terms of Islamic side, but also for finance. He's able to really articulate the integration of both sides. So there's going to be some interesting points of views and clarifications and some of the uncertainties or some questions that we might all have. This will be a great way to kind of talk about some of those topics. Next person I have is Brother Abed, Awad. He's our attorney. He's a co-founder of Sharia Wiz. He's a professor. He's based out of Jersey, but he's a subject matter expert. He travels around the world and just talks about in courts, whether in law. Very great a resource for us to have tonight, so we appreciate him being here as well. And then Imam Azeez doesn't really need an introduction, but we're very happy that he's allowed us to host tonight. And Imam Azeez, he's going to give us a point of view from a community aspect. I'll be asking him questions on some of the experiences he's had. Brother Abed will kind of fill in some gaps on the legalities, and Shaykh will kind of easily give us a thumbs up, thumbs down kind of approach, and kind of keep it casual for today. We'll try not to go too much into the details. That's something I can do offline. If you don't know me, I'm Shaykh. I'm founder of HAYA Financial Strategies and Insurance Agency out here in Roseville, California. We've helped clients, Muslim clients, brothers and sisters, go through their planning and just kind of, figure out where they are in their timeline, what's coming, and how to really integrate both the legalities, the finance, and how do we integrate that with our Islamic principles and values. So I'll try to keep that as the theme, and hopefully, inshallah, we'll address some of the concerns that you've been asking me for the past 2-3 months, maybe up to a year, but we'll do our best. Azeez, I want to start with you. If you can probably give us some context into how we're here, and I'll go from there.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I wanted to say Jazakallah khair for joining us tonight, in support of this event, to pursue this very important type of knowledge. I think Brother Shaykh made the mistake of saying I am one of the panelists. I'm not. I'm here to introduce them and to emphasize the importance of listening to what they have to say, and to just be a good host and honor our guests. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you both for coming from long distances to be with us and increase this community in literacy. And just a couple of really quick things that I wanted to say from my own personal experience, and I know that it's probably what drove you to come here tonight anyway. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَمَنْ يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ فَقَدْ فَازَ فَوْزًا عَظِيمًا. وَمَنْ يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ فَقَدْ فَازَ فَوْزًا عَظِيمًا. Whoever obeys Allah and His Messenger will achieve the biggest triumph, will achieve the absolute most amazing victory in life. For the injunctions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as detailed in the Quran is not a matter of subjectivity. This is not something for us to choose to follow or choose not to follow. These are not the laws of the state of California, where we follow them when we feel that the eye of the law is on us, and we disobey them when we feel that we can get away with it. This is not how we treat the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He tells you that if you follow the laws of God, you will have triumph in this dunya and in the akhirah. This is really what drives us. I don't know if anyone has any other intention. I just want to live halal and die comfortably and stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not having to be held to account for so many things that I've done. I want to minimize the liability as much as possible. And so, looking at my career, personally, and the kinds of things that we face, Muslims are always faced with a choice between, pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or following the laws of the land. Sometimes they are compatible, sometimes they're not. And we have to grapple with this reality, as we live in a non-Muslim society where, there are laws that are made, some are compatible, some are incompatible with our faith, and we have to deal with this, right? For example, imams have to deal with end-of-life affairs all the time. People at the end of the road, someone passed away, head of a household, and they have a house, and they have some assets, and they have kids. Now a dispute starts in the family. How's everything going to be distributed? Will the spouse get 50%? Will the spouse get 100%? How much is every son or daughter is going to be getting? And that is just a dispute between them, let alone Uncle Sam wanting his piece of the pie, right? I've seen families who've had to sell assets just to fulfill the death tax, as they call it. I have seen people at the end of their marriage, husband and wife who are not able to live with each other anymore, and all kinds of disputes and all kinds of issues arise, as the divorce takes place, custody and money and everything like that. And sometimes people just want to have the biggest share. But I think most of the time, from my experience, people want to do what's halal. And they're not able to do what's halal sometimes because of the laws of the state in which they live. I have seen people that wanted to dedicate a portion of their wealth, to their masajid, and they don't know how to do that. I have seen families that are very, very scared because they don't think that their heirs have enough to cover death expenses and to cover burial expenses. Or they're leaving behind young kids, or they're leaving behind a spouse that does not work. These are very real questions that we have to grapple with on a regular basis. And so the idea of this panel was conceived a few months ago when Brother Shaykh and I were having conversations similar to this, right? What do we do with this and what do we do with that? And then we realized that there is an Islamic solution. That there is a way to deal with all of these challenges and at the same time remain loyal to your faith without breaking any laws. And that is one of the reasons why we brought our esteemed guests to speak to us tonight, is to help us navigate, this rabbit hole. How do we stay true to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how to not break any laws at the same time and make it all work. I know that some of these questions have not been fully answered yet, but that's okay. We're starting this very first step, and inshallah more and more and more to come. And here's the thing, and I will end with this. I think that this is what you guys are thinking right now. You're thinking, I'm Muslim, I live in a non-Muslim society. My job is to save myself and to save my family. That's all I care about. How do I do it the right way, right? But if you think that you want to do it the right way, that is a tacit assumption that society is not doing it the right way. Wouldn't you agree? If you're saying, I want to do it the right way, you're assuming, without thinking about it, that other people are not doing it the right way. So I actually feel that as Muslims, we have a responsibility to develop solutions, not only for us and for our community, but solutions that could actually be adopted in the near future by wider society in a system of laws that is, clearly broken. We have the good stuff. We have the khair with us. We have the right kind of guidance that was given to us by the divine. So we should not keep that to ourselves. I actually think that we should be super diligent providing these solutions, not only because we need them ourselves, but I think that this society needs them just as much. And one of my shuyukh, taught me when I was a kid. He said, I want you to imagine, this first sailor from Yemen that landed in Kerala, India, over 1,000 years ago, looked around right and left and saw all these people, worshiping idols and all these people that had no idea who God is. Imagine what was going on in their heads. Will Islam ever spread in these parts? Will my system of laws of Sharia ever impact these lands? But then he thought to himself, you know what, doesn't matter, I'm just going to do my part and let Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deal with the rest. 1,000 years later, the rest is history, as they say. Islam spread in those parts of the world. In fact, I think Kerala is one of the earliest cities in India that received Islam, probably even before Islam came to the north. All right, and the Islamic tradition, the ancient Islamic tradition, and the masajid and the Shafi'i madhab, by the way, they're still practiced in Kerala to this day. And of course, you use this analogy and apply it to Afghanistan, apply it to Syria and Egypt, apply it to North Africa, apply it to Turkey and Istanbul. I'm sure the Muslims looked at Constantinople and it was a far-fetched idea that Islam was going to be the law of that land, yet it did. Is it far-fetched for us to look at America the next 100 years and assume, or at least hope, that inshallah ta'ala there will be mass conversions to Islam, I think this country is ripe. It's just you have to have that confidence that the earlier pioneers of Islam had, and mashallah we have stronger institutions, we have better financial resources, we have social media, and we have 1400 years of experience. I think we can do it. So inshallah ta'ala, whatever it is that we learn tonight, let that be a springboard to change that happens not only in our lives, but in our own society and the people that live around us as well. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to maximize the benefit for each and every one of us tonight. And please listen attentively to what these amazing speakers have to share. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
We're done.
Yeah. Thank you, Imam Azeez. That's a very nice articulation of the reality, right? So I'm going to start in that in the space where he said, worst case scenario, we pass away, when we pass away, and then the second worst case scenario is you could go through a divorce. So I'm going to talk about the death and divorce, the two Ds, right? In our sessions we talk about that. Brother Abed is going to explain a little bit more on the Sharia whiz and the importance of wills and trusts and how does that the how to make that mitigation. I'll give you an example. For myself, right? I'm married, I got kids. If something were to happen to me tonight going home, I want to make sure that I've done whatever I'm supposed to be doing to not put a burden on them, or that they don't have to wake up tomorrow and go start a GoFundMe page or come to the mosque and ask for help. I want to do my part. And in order to do that, I need to know what the laws of this country are and how I can infuse that with my Islamic values. So Sharia is able to kind of deliver on that, right? So we all have the education, we know the importance of things, the why to do it. We might be missing the how. And I'd like Brother Abed to kind of expand on the how. Sharia helps us to do that in those two areas of death and divorce. So he'll talk a little bit about wills, trusts, and prenups. Again, all three items that we need to discuss and find our balance of how to implement that as Muslims. Brother Abed?
Thank you very much, Shakeb, for that kind introduction, and I'm very lucky. You can maybe I can test this first. Test it. Do you hear me now? How about now?
Yeah.
Perfect. أولا السلام عليكم والصلاة والسلام على الصادق الأمين. I want to thank Brother Shakeb and Imam Azeez for putting this thing together and having me share this stage with a very esteemed Shaykh and Mufti in our community. I'm a lawyer in New York, New Jersey, and I've been a lawyer for 25 years. So I've represented, I was talking to one of the brothers today, 90% to 95% of my clients for 25 years are Muslim and Arab. So I primarily represented my community. So I have a unique insight, almost anthropological, on the issues that are engaged primarily at times of dispute. In my practice, I've done a lot of divorce, estate planning, a lot of litigation, a lot of expert work relating to Islamic law that is implicated in our community. So from that 25 years of experience, and also teaching Islamic law at Rutgers Law School for 17 years, and studying Islamic law now for the past 29, 30 years, I came to understand the Sharia as what we would say in Arabic, manhajiyatun tej ma'rifa, an epistemology that produces knowledge. And that epistemology that produces knowledge, the outcome of it is fiqh. And this fiqh is unique and anchored to the circumstances, the factual circumstances of the community where it lives. So when the scholars were asked to define al-fiqh, they said ilm al-ikhtilaf, that fiqh is the science of difference. That's the mercy of our Sharia, that the Sharia is not, there's no monopoly over divine will. The Sharia all over the Muslim world had this diversity that it was its engine for innovation and change and constantly providing solutions for a Muslim community. When we are just discussing right now about halal and haram. That's the solution that the Sharia provides, that moral compass at the end. But that moral compass in the end is about ethical living. It's about this harmony amongst us as community, amongst us as a family. So when we say something is halal, it's ultimately that the guide of being ethical, having harmonious marital relationships, harmonious community relationships, understanding that the part of worship is giving charity, how we work to each other, that the level of transparency that we give when you prostrate for Allah, this is the same thing when you do a transaction of business, about transparency, about honesty, about being fair. That's the ethical lifestyle. That's what the Sharia is. It's not just about, well, is this haram or is this halal? It's about that ethical moral compass. So we took this moral compass and we said, okay, this community now, we have technology that is, can't live without it. How can we make this access to this few steps for this moral and ethical living, which is organizing your life during lifetime and during death. So in the event of death, you want to less burden your family. So I've seen in my community, clients come to me and they want to create a will, or they want to create a trust, because they say, I don't want my children to be struggling to find a lawyer to go to court and represent them. I don't want my relatives to be fighting about what is for them and what is for my wife. I want to clear this burden in my lifetime where I have control over it, and I will be able to make my family's life easier and let them grieve my passing, as opposed to being running from one court to another to sort out our financial affairs. So I automated with my team this entire process in Sharia Wiz. So Sharia Wiz was born as a Muslim American experiment. An experiment to say to Muslims that we as Muslim Americans can najtahid and create a platform with an ecosystem that adjusts and is anchored in the unique circumstances of us living in this country. So for example, many of us are middle class, we are married. If I have a client, they say they want an Islamic will. When I explain to them the Islamic will, the spouse, the wife would say, well, you're telling me that I'm only entitled to 1/8 of the estate, but I've been married for 20 years. I want to comply with the Sharia. I want to comply. This is in the Quran. But I'm having this second thoughts and asking myself, if the Quran is anchored in charity, anchored in equity, how is this working? Can you explain? Because many would opt out and do the secular will because they don't want the Sharia distributions. But when you understood the Sharia in its totality, how it functioned in the pre-modern period, it functioned as a cohesive system. The fact that the wife received 1/8 is only because the males in the family had so many more financial burdens that they had to resolve. And women were able to maintain their inheritance that they received from their maternal side as their separate property. So there's a lot of reasons to explain how that equity functioned in the pre-modern time. But even in the pre-modern time, Muslims who wanted to support their spouses who participated in the acquisition of the marital estate, they had their own property. In fact, in a very famous book called Al-Du'a al-Lami' li Ahl al-Qarn al-Tasi' for a scholar named Sakhawi from Egypt, he wrote this volume of 15 volume of people who lived in the 15th century AD. He had one volume dedicated to women. And in this volume, you find that Muslim women were very proactive in society. They were creating waqfs. They were marrying, divorcing, remarrying. They were opening businesses. They were traveling. And all their stories are documented in this amazing, amazing book. There are studies of, in Damascus, somewhere in the neighborhood of 25% of waqfs that were established in Damascus were established by Muslim women. Almost 40% of Muslim women established waqfs in other parts of the Muslim world. So that means Muslim women had access to capital and had control over capital. So explain that influenced the way the Sharia was platform. It took into account, very important, that if a spouse contributes to the acquisition of the marital estate, if the spouse works at the family business, if the wife left her career to create a marital estate, that means that she has a legal and equitable interest in that property, other than her 1/8, other than her divorce, mahr, sadaq. So we took these items into account in building the Sharia's platform as this automated system of how to live a moral and ethical lifestyle that allows you the customization, that saves you. It's accessible and easy. Instead of paying thousands of dollars, you can do it in 15 minutes on your computer. We also, at Sharia Wiz, you are able to do will-based estate plans. A will estate plan means a will, a healthcare directive, and also includes a general power of attorney. So this covers in the event of death or disability. A trust-based estate plan includes a trust, a pour-over will, a power of attorney, and a living will healthcare directive. Same thing, these are estate plans. It's an entire package. We also have the one and only, and this is the most innovative contribution that we at Sharia Wiz have provided for the community, is al-waqf al-ahli. So we have a family waqf, which is a joint trust that allows the parties to pool their assets together, and there is no distribution until the death of a surviving spouse. So this way, the wife is protected, the husband's protected, the children are protected, the estate is protected. So these are types of, like, the big picture that I just wanted to provide. We also offer Sharia-compliant prenuptial agreements. Again, the Sharia-compliant prenuptial agreement places gender-specific financial obligations on the males. I get clients who are secular, who come to do prenups in my office. The woman gets 0 in the event of divorce. Well, that doesn't work from a Sharia perspective. We talked about equity and fairness. So in the Sharia-compliant prenuptial agreement, all of the financial obligations are on the spouse. Not only is there a right for mu'akhar al-sadaq that you can negotiate, we also added something called nafaqat al-mita', which has been codified in the personal status laws of many Muslim countries. That means that you could also agree to pay additional money to compensate jabr khatir, the wife, in the event of divorce based on the duration of the years. So we provide this platform to make it easy for all of you to have access that's affordable and comply with the steps necessary for an ethical and moral lifestyle. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Now, the best way of understanding Sharia Wiz is probably to have our brother Shaykh Umer. He's actually a user of Sharia Wiz and has used it for his family. So I would leave that aspect of how it's use better than me doing propaganda and marketing. I'll have a user talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Abed. Just to keep track on time, I'm going to speed it up just a little bit and I'll summarize. If you go to Sharia Wiz, it is the only platform that allows you to kind of put this into place. There's more information there. On your seats, you have a flyer for our office. At the end of this, if at any time you have questions, concerns, please call, text, or get a hold of us, or even come to our classes that we have here once a month. To take a step back, as we're articulating all of this information, I want you to envision our finance group, which is called Bayt al-Mal. I wanted to clarify that. It's broken out into these 3 areas, right? What we just talked about was the roof of that Bayt al-Mal, the legalities. We're going to talk a little bit more about the structure of the house, and then we'll move down to the foundation of the house, which and how these 3 components really takes care of you and your family in this ecosystem of all the laws that we have to address. I'll give Shaykh a couple more minutes to answer, but I do want him to take us into the investment aspect of the things and just give it a highlight of maybe why it might be beneficial to have a broker account, to invest using that, and maybe integrate the zakat and the benefits of donating appreciated assets. So Shaykh again is executive member of the Fiqh Council of North America. He's also on the board of the Jurists Council, the Umjur Council here in El Grove. These are the top two entities that help us kind of dictate what is allowed, what is not. He's at the very front of all this information. I'll let Shaykh just.
The investment side.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Had some comments on the estate planning side and prenup, but inshallah we'll get to that after the prayer. So, jazakallah khair again for the invite, Shakeb and Imam Azeez. I really appreciate it. Very welcoming community. I love this masjid, mashallah, very large musalla here, quite impressive. So just to quickly talk about investing, first of all, just highlighting the importance of wealth in Islam. So Allah gave us this, most of us gave us some extra wealth, some extra money that we have in our wallet, that might be sitting in our bank accounts, that might be sitting maybe under the pillow. I don't know, different people have their wealth in different places, but this is wealth that Allah has entrusted us with. And what He expects us to do is one of three things. Either we go spend it, and inshallah we spend it in smart ways, on useful, beneficial things for ourselves, our families, and we're allowed to do that. Alhamdulillah, we've been given this wealth and we can spend it on ourselves and we can spend it on others. The second thing we can do, of course, is we can give it as charity or we can give it as a gift. We build relationships with each other by giving gifts. We give charity, we give zakat, which is obligatory. The third thing that we can do is we can invest it. And what we don't want is we don't want too much cash sitting around in a bank account. That's just not an Islamic way of dealing with wealth. We don't want money to be sitting somewhere because money, when it circulates, it provides benefit. You're spending it, it creates jobs. You're spending it on products and services. Those products are creating jobs behind them. Those services are creating jobs behind them. And as anyone who studied microeconomics or macroeconomics knows, this fundamentally boosts the economy. That's why they try and make you spend money. Why do they lower the interest rates? They lower the interest rates because it's not that interesting to leave money in the bank anymore. So they want you to spend the money, right? Spending will boost the economy, it boosts the ummah, it boosts everybody. So fundamentally, those are three things we can do, right? Spend, give, or invest. So why invest? If you save, let's say the average career of a person is 40 years. Maybe you're working from age of 25 to the age of 65. If you save $400 a month and you just save it, after 40 years, how much money do you have? It's less than $200,000. After 40 years, less than $200,000. If instead you just take that money and you invest it in, let's say, a 401k, Roth IRA, whatever you choose, and you let it grow, just on average in the stock market. You don't even think about which stocks, you just put it in an index, HAYA index, for example. That money, after 40 years, take a guess, how much does it become? 2 million? 3 million. Okay. So it becomes $3 million. If you're just saving money, after 40 years you have $200,000. If you were investing it, by the way, you can do the math, there's calculators online. Do the math. Go say, if I start putting $400 aside, January 1981, and I go all the way up to 2020, that's 40 years, right? Or you can start in 84 and go up to now, whatever. It's going to say that you will make $3 million in that time. So again, this goes back to, this is why zakat, by the way, zakat is only on excess wealth. If you're using something, if you're investing in something, then your zakat burden goes down, right? You don't pay zakat on your house. You don't pay zakat on your clothes, your furniture, your car. Similarly, if you're running a business, you're running an ice cream shop, your freezers, you don't pay zakat on. Your cash register, you don't pay zakat on. The building that you own for the ice cream shop, you don't pay zakat on because those things are being put to use. That's not excess wealth. So when you invest in something, you're putting that money to use. The assets that you're buying are in use. There's no zakat on that. There is zakat on stocks, but the zakat is only on the cash, the accounts receivable, and the inventory. It's very, very low amount. Your zakat burden goes down from 2.5% to something like 0.3%. Okay, it becomes very low. So you're saving on zakat, you're beating inflation, and you're benefiting yourself and you're growing the wealth. Now, getting to an important point, because Shakeb wanted me to talk about this, is as you grow your wealth, you're setting yourself up for taxes. Okay, so if you're not in an IRA, Roth IRA, 401k, you're setting yourself up for taxes. But there's two ways to avoid those taxes. One is that you have a solid estate plan. So you have a proper will, you have a proper living trust, everything that Abed was talking about. You need to have that because when you pass away, if you have a proper estate plan, those capital gains get wiped out. Your inheritors get all of that money and they don't have to pay tax on it at all. The capital gains get completely wiped out. It's called cost basis step up. You can Google that if you like, or ask questions about it after Aisha. That's one way to do it. Secondly, if you're investing because maybe you're saving up for Hajj, maybe you're saving up for college education for your kids, maybe you're saving up because you want to eventually buy a house, whatever the reason might be. Not everyone is saving up to give to their family at death, right? Maybe you're saving for some other reason for the short term. So if you're doing that and you want to pull the money out, there are tax benefits that can be utilized to benefit yourself, to benefit a non-profit charity, such as this masjid, for example, and also to minimize the tax burden. So I'll just go through a very quick example, because I know we're running late for Aisha. Let's say you started with $100 and you invested that into some stocks, and then the value of that went up over time, and it became $200. So how much profit have you made? You started with 100, it became 200. How much was the profit? It's not a trick question. How much? How much? 100%. 100. Okay, you made $100, right? Now, many people are going to be, let's just say, marginal tax rates. Federal's 37. California, you get to 12% very easily. There's NIIT, another tax you have to pay 3.8%. Let's just average that out. We're living in California. Let's say it's 50%. Okay, let's make our lives easy. Let's say you're paying 50% tax on that. Okay, so you made $100 profit. You're going to pay $50 in tax, right? So at the end of the day, how much money do you have left? 150, right? 150. You paid 50 in tax. Uncle Sam got 50. You are left with 150. Maybe you take that 150 and you give that to the masjid. Okay. So the masjid got 150. Uncle Sam got 50. So far, so good. By the way, when I did that, if I give that to the masjid, I also get a tax benefit. So I get $75 deduction. That goes against my income. So that's really useful. Okay. Remember the numbers. The masjid got 150. I got a $75 benefit, right? Uncle Sam got $50 from me. Instead, what I can do is I can take my stocks that went to $200. I can give that to the masjid, either directly or through donor advice fund. There's two different ways to do it, but I can give it directly. If my masjid accepts stocks as charity, I can give the masjid $200. Okay? How much money did the masjid get when I gave them $200 of stocks? 200, right? But how much was it before? How much did the masjid get?
50.
150. Yeah? Now it got 200. Now when I give the stocks away as charity, my taxes get wiped out. No longer do I have to pay taxes on the gains. That $50 I was paying to Uncle Sam, I no longer have to pay that, right? So $50 there, don't have to pay. The masjid got 200 instead of 150. My tax credit, I said I get back 75 last time because it's 50%. Now I get $100 tax credit. You see that? I not only didn't pay the taxes on the gains, I increased my credit. The government got nothing, and the masjid got a lot more money. Simple trick, very simple trick. Otherwise you're paying all these taxes. So there's a variety of different techniques that we as a Muslim community need to learn about, educate ourselves on. We need to make sure that our nonprofits are accepting stocks. We need to make sure we have good financial planning going on, that we're learning these tricks, and we're taking full advantage of them. Because they're available, they're easy, they're not that hard. We just need to get smarter about it.
Still have time?
Okay. Should I go back and add to the...
Yes.
Or do you want to...
2 minutes and then I'll take the last 3 minutes.
Okay, 2 minutes. Okay. Bismillah. I'm trying to remember what I wanted to say. I think just a couple of points. I think Abed wanted me to talk about this. So just first of all, Sharia is something that like I wish I had this idea of sharing with Shakeb. I was actually working with someone to say, can you create something like this? Because we have this gap. For people who don't have a lot of money, they just need a simple way. Maybe they can go to legalzoom.com or something. Maybe they can create something. For people who have very advanced estate planning needs, you have to go to an attorney and you have to spend thousands of dollars. I'm sorry, but you have to do that because your estate planning is too complicated. But let's say 70, 80% of Muslims out there, we're neither at the very bottom, nor are we at the very top and extremely rich. We're in the middle class. And we just need a simple estate planning solution that doesn't cost thousands of dollars, that doesn't cause us to have to go to an attorney and sit there for hours and plan something out. But a simple system like most of us like to use TurboTax for taxes, right? Some people go to an accountant. Their taxes are so complicated because you're making millions and so complicated, so many expenses and write-offs. So you just need a simple legal system. You log into a website, fill out a form, boom, you have a living trust. I mean, this is what I wanted to have, and alhamdulillah, found Abed who's done this already. So I said, listen, I need an estate plan for my parents. So I got the access to Sharia Wiz, and I sat down with my parents. I said, you know what, let's make 2-3 hours, let's sit down, let's work on this. So we start filling the form out. It's like, you know, your name, age, this, that, click, 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 click. Go through the thing, 15 minutes later, I'm like, it's done. I'm like, what? I'm like, it's done, alhamdulillah. So estate planning simplified, like I don't get paid for this, but alhamdulillah, like it really is a very simple tool to get a will and a living trust at the same time. Avoids all the probates and all that stuff. And most importantly, we were talking about the legal headaches, but remember, Allah says in the Quran, we were quoting earlier, when Allah talks about the verses of inheritance, He says, تِلْكَ حُدُودُ اللَّهِ, and these are the limits of Allah that He set. And He goes on and says, whoever obeys them, they will enter Jannah, and whoever disobeys them, they will enter hellfire. He's very explicit about it, okay? And so these are the limits. So if we're not following this, we know that the Quran has set aside fractions of how does your estate get distributed. And by default, the law of the land does not follow that. So if we know that, it's an obligation upon us to go and make that happen. I'm not here to tell you you have to use Sharia Wiz or this or that. What I'm here to tell you is just remind us, just to kind of remind us of our obligation that we have to take care of these things. It is incumbent upon us that we take a little bit of time thinking about this very difficult issue and make sure that we have taken care of this, because yes, we don't want to leave our inheritors with a headache. We don't want them to run from courthouse to courthouse. But more importantly, we need to be able to stand in front of Allah and say we were one of those who obeyed Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so how do we stand in front of Allah and claim that we have obeyed Him if we have not taken care of our estate plan? Do what you need to do, find whoever you need to find, but please, 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 I urge you, take care of it.
Thank you for that. So I got 3 points that I heard. I'll just recap. If I pass away, I don't want my family burdened, so I want to make sure I do this small little task and get this paperwork out of the way. That's what I got. Second one, God forbid something happens, and if you have to go through a divorce, and if you're going to get married as a Muslim, then why risk getting divorced as a non-Muslim, right? That's the second thing I got. And then the third thing was very cool. I didn't know it was going to be a math test, but that math worked out, that checked out. I don't know about you, but I would definitely like to, you know, not voluntarily give to the government, and if I can reroute that to my charity, then absolutely that's a win-win situation. Those are the 3 points that I got in the first 2 sections of our Bayt structure: the roof, the legalities, the investment. Something very simple, right? We're going to give you some simple topics, but they're going to be very impactful. The last portion of it, and then just 2 minutes, and then we'll break for a prayer, is the insurance part, right? The insurance law is the foundation of this Bayt law. Quick examples of that is when we have health insurance. If you can and have access to either an HSA or FSA, then that is the kind of route that you want to go to, and we can answer a little bit more questions in our Q&A session on that. But then also, how do we maximize and make sure that the employer-provided benefits, whether that's, I think this just went dead. what did I say? The
Employer-provided benefits.
The employer-provided benefits, it could be, you know, life insurance, it could be disability, long-term care, things like that. It's as long as you're with the employer, you have all these benefits available to you. But then we also have to address what happens if we're not employed with that and all these benefits go away. How do we look at that on the private market? Make sure that in our entire estate plan and that Bayt structure, we have these components kind of addressing and really integrating holistically. So I'll stop there for now, and we'll continue this with your questions and concerns and comments after prayer, inshallah.
Before we stand up, inshallah, for prayer, I wanted to again emphasize the purpose of why we're here, right? So we need to ask the questions that we have. This is a unique opportunity, inshallah, to have these learned brothers, on this panel. We need to ask questions about inheritance, about life insurance, about wills and trusts, and end of life management, prenuptial agreements, whatever that comes to your mind. Make sure that you take it away, inshallah, tonight. And I wanted to, on the subject of wills and living trusts, this has been obviously a struggle in the community for years. I'm getting people asking questions. What do I do? What do I do? How do I prepare? How do I get ready, for the inevitable? And it was always not easy to answer those questions, until, alhamdulillah, a few years ago, we started having these conversations. And the one thing that we really, at least at the very bare minimum, is to have our wills written, your wasiyah. In fact, there are many scholars that consider it to be wajib. You have Hassan al-Basri, Sa'id ibn Musayyib, Ata, all these guys, they consider this to be wajib, and many other scholars say it is only wajib if you have liabilities or unaccounted for that would cause a mess, in the event of your death. But we have many scholars that say, if you have an inheritable asset, you need to write your wasiyah, your will. And so we've been trying to find a solution for our community because the demand is so huge. So, when I spoke with Brother Shaykh, HAYA Financial, I think they managed to offer how many? 500 wills that they will write to the community without any charge. They will charge you if you go with the living trust route, but at least get the will done, because you have this document that will protect the assets, that will tell the heirs what to do in the event of your death, giving them instructions, just the detail. I want to be buried here. I want my wealth to be managed this way. Just the basic stuff. So that, you put your head on your pillow and you feel comfortable that you've done your part before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So alhamdulillah, we have that option at least. But I strongly encourage you to consider, going through the trust process. And that's, I think, where Sharia always comes in. So inshallah, we're going to stop here. We're going to pray Salat al-Isha. And then come back, inshallah, for Q&A. Jazakallah khair.
It's important that a Muslim So, Imam, should we just have them do it on this side? Yeah, we'll let them know. So this,
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Inshallah, we're going to be praying Salat al-Isha over here on this side, so let's not touch the chairs. The brothers will be here in the front, the sisters in the back, and if there's overflow, inshallah, the sisters can use the carpets in the back, the far back as well.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. We're going to pray on the right side of the musalla. So we're going to pray on the right side. I think there's more than enough space, inshallah, for the brothers and sisters. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah.
حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
So, until you strain the lines, fill the gaps, pray as if this is your last prayer. Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Malik Yawm Ad-Din. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. لقد أرسلنا رسلنا بالبينات وأنزلنا معهم الكتاب والميزان ليقوم الناس بالقسط وأنزلنا الحديد فيه بأس شديد ومنافع للناس وليعلم الله من ينصره ورسله بالغيب إن الله قوي عزيز. ولقد أرسلنا نوحا وإبراهيم وجعلنا في ذريتهما النبوة والكتاب فمنهم مهتد وكثير منهم فاسقون. ثم قفينا على آثارهم برسلنا وقفينا بعيسى ابن مريم وآتيناه الإنجيل وجعلنا في قلوب الذين اتبعوه رأفة ورحمة ورهبانية ابتدعوها ما كتبناها عليهم إلا ابتغاء رضوان الله فما رعوها حق رعايتها فآتينا الذين آمنوا منهم أجرهم وكثير منهم فاسقون. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وآمنوا برسوله يؤتكم كفلين من رحمته ويجعل لكم نورا تمشون به ويغفر لكم والله غفور رحيم لئلا يعلم أهل الكتاب ألا يقدرون على شيء من فضل الله وأن الفضل بيد الله يؤتيه من يشاء والله ذو الفضل العظيم الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
شكلي مصري وبحكي مصري بيعتز كولومبيا، البيرو، الدول اللاتينية والإفريقية تتحد لمقاطعة إسرائيل بسبب
But for him, it took him a while. Alhamdulillah, he got it now. He stayed 3, 4, 12 shifts or whatever it was, 4 days off. You'll never get toxic, especially. You'll never get fixed. Like, you'll get 4 days off, but you'll realize you want to do more. You'll get shut down.
سمع صراخنا يا معتصمة.
Manan used it. You guys carpool or you just came out hanging out?
مش مثلا مش هيضروهم مثلا الاجزاء اللي جاي يتآمر عليه إلا أيام حتى لو حصلت أيام
السلام عليكم.
وكان استثناء مش
In the beginning, in the beginning, somebody else. Are you talking about like for the prayer? No. In the beginning, no. I'm gonna cut it out. I'm gonna edit it after. I don't think anybody was on there, so they have to rewind. Right now it's live, so whatever we're having conversation we're having now, it's fine. Yeah. I'm gonna go. No. I'll go back immediately after you guys are done. I'll go and I'll clip it so that it'll automatically.
Yeah, because I was starting to have anxiety.
You all the haters are on there taking notes. Let's get him in court. Hey, you said this on this channel.
Just like some private stuff.
Personal stuff. Yeah. It shouldn't be public knowledge. My mom has diabetes as well. It's a challenge. It's a challenge, especially you're out of it. You love the flour and kunafa and everything, right? Yeah, exactly. They have the sugar-free stuff now.
Like I'm looking at my sugar. Let's see, where are we?
Well, you got the fat.
All right, I'm doing good.
Okay, you're good. You gotta, so my mom is diabetic. Sometimes I'll joke and say, when we're about to have we're Afghans, so there's a lot of rice in our, rice and then bread and the bread with rice. It's a thing.
Rice and bread.
Yeah, exactly. So I tell her, sometimes I'll see what's going to be for dinner, and I'll say, Mom, do you have any extra insulin? I could use it, preemptively strike. No, let me get some ice cream before school. Yeah. No, right now, like, it's a turning point. I was born and raised here, but I'm from in San Francisco, so much has changed. But if you want really good Afghan food, you gotta go to Fremont, which is not that far from San Francisco. It's about 40 minutes. You'll actually pass, I think, there'll be a junction where you can grab the other way. You can head out to Fremont. So there's Manan, DE space AFG.
I don't like to be the bad guy. No.
That's a good
Today
one.
only, okay.
Your title is Imam.
That's really the best part. That's the best.
It's part of your job.
There's a spot
I invoke that one.
here in North Island. That's like what's the best happening. It's called ARIA. Afghan kebab.
Assalamu alaikum.
It's in
Assalamu alaikum.
On site. Yeah. This
Can we
that's
find
the
our
place.
seats?
You get the combination plate. Done.
Can you hear me in the back? No. Socializing? What is that? Folks in the back, chai station, chai khatam. Thank you, brothers.
It's a very diverse community.
Oh, a little too diverse sometimes. We have African Americans, we have Turks,
Mashallah.
Uzbeks, and all kinds of Arab.
عرب فلسطينية.
فلسطينية ومصرية وجزائريين.
جزائريين.
Oh yeah.
Folks in the back and the chai and coffee, we're ready to begin. While folks are coming back to the seats, if you guys want to grab your phones and open your browser and go to shariawiz.com, it's SHARIAWIZ.com. SHARIAWIZ.com. The second website you want to go to is HAYA Financial. HAYA Financial. The first step would be if you really want to get these things implemented, or even just finding out more information, or just asking questions in a more one-on-one session. Please take that brochure. My calendar is on it. That's the first and the most hardest and the difficult thing to do, is to find some time to talk about this. After that, it's easy. We've got the process, the templates, the compliance. I mean, it's all there. It literally is in our hands to take that action and change the trajectory of our financial future, peace of mind. However you want to, like Imam said, go to bed easy, peacefully, just taking this burden off your shoulders. I've went through it in my process with my family, and I feel pretty good. If something were to happen to me, it's taken care of. I'm not going to leave anything, any burden on anyone. And in most cases, you end up leaving more behind for charity, for your family. So please go to those two websites, get some info, and take that first step. Don't be shy. I know it's a common uncomfort working with in the Muslim communities, trusting each other and whatever background, cultures, and traditions we might have. But let's take that first step and do something about it. Anybody have their first question, or I might pick on somebody in the audience? Brother in the back. Is that a yes or no question? It depends. So, anybody want to take this first?
I think he's most qualified on the insurance question.
So,
You want to take it? You take it.
So it's not a yes or no question, right? I mean, it's you can say is a 401k halal or haram, right? Any of these account structures, these mechanisms, these tools that we have available to us, are we going to use it in a proper manner that helps us or benefits us in our family, or for charity, or for whatever purpose, right? So it depends on how you're going to use it. It's not just like a blanket yes or no. I think the general consensus in the scholars that it might be yes, but they do have a criteria to follow of how to address it, how to look for a proper company, how to structure your contract and your policies in the right manner. What is it that you're trying to fulfill or mitigate? Is it a young brother who just got a house, just got a job, or just has a child, and if something were to happen to them, in a car accident or something, like what is that how do we balance that out or mitigate that danger? Then
Provide
probably
some,
so.
provide some nuance to that.
Thank you.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Assalamu alaikum. So the question was, are annuities and life insurance halal or haram? I appreciate the very direct question. Jazakallah khair. The answer is it depends, but I want to provide some of the nuance that might help with the answer. So first of all, annuities, let's just get that one out of the way. Annuities as a default are absolutely impermissible, okay? Because an annuity, what you're getting is effectively, it's just an interest-based instrument. And so I've never found anyone to say that annuity is going to be halal because it's just like giving a loan to somebody and getting interest on it. And the annuity, generally goes in perpetuity or whatever it might be. Annuities are not permissible. Life insurance is a tricky subject, and scholars have been divided on it. This is not a new issue, by the way. This has been discussed. We were just talking about the Hanafi school. This has been discussed by Ibn Abedin like hundreds of years ago. So this has been an issue of discussion. What makes it halal? What makes it haram? There are some things that the scholars are relatively unified about. So for example, if you're getting life insurance from your employer, this is a topic that has been discussed extensively, and most scholars have said this would be considered compensation as a part of your job, and so this would be permissible. Okay, life insurance provided by the government, life insurance provided by your employer. So there's a category of life insurance that automatically falls into is declared to be permissible. Then there's many types of life insurance. There's term life insurance, there's whole life insurance, there's universal life insurance. There's even, what's it called, final expenses insurance, there's just a variety of different types of insurance. And as a default, just to start off with, as a default, the majority of scholars have found insurance to be not permissible, as a default, okay? Some scholars disagree with that. Shaykh Mustafa Zarqa is a very well-known, Manzur Kahaf is another one who's a contemporary scholar. So there's scholars who have disagreed with that position, and they've justified it, and they have written extensively about this, and so we can see what their case is. So again, so it starts with that default. Despite the default, we have certain fiqh maxims, we have certain universal principles in fiqh. Because Allah doesn't want us to live a life of hardship. And so there are certain principles Allah says in the Quran, يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرَ وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْعُسْرَ, right? Allah doesn't want hardship for us. So based on this, scholars have taken from the Quran and Sunnah certain maxims. For example, الضَّرُورَاتُ تُذِيبُ الْمَحْظُورَاتِ, that necessity can make things that are impermissible permissible. Or الْمَشَقَّةُ تَجْلِبُ التَّيْسِيرِ, that when you have hardship, then things in the Sharia become flexible to allow for that, right? So if you're about to die, for example, you can eat pig, you can drink alcohol, right? Those types of things. So building upon these principles, many scholars have said, not that we're going to say, we're not saying that life insurance is going to be permissible, period. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is there are cases where it may be necessity, and there's cases where it might be a need, but when a need is applied at a community level, it can be raised to the level of necessity. Okay, there's some principles behind it. I don't want to get too technical about it. So one of the things that I'm part of the Fiqh Council of North America, and one of the fatwas that we've been working on as a committee is to kind of lay out the nuance of, look, certain types of life insurance, we're not going to allow under any circumstance. They're way too problematic. They're built on a foundation of gambling and riba and uncertainty. It's just way too problematic. We're not going to allow some of these. Other type of life insurances, even though the default would have been that they're impermissible, they could be allowed with certain, what we call in the science of fatwa, we say with certain dawabit and shurut, with under certain conditions and restrictions, and if these things apply to you. So we're very close to publishing a pretty extensive fatwa on this. So I don't want to get into the detail because we're finalizing certain details. So if I start talking about exactly what's allowed and what's not allowed, that might change, right? So we're making those minor changes right now. But there are cases under which many scholars will say that life insurance can become permissible, but only certain types and only under certain conditions. So I'm not going to sit here. I don't want anyone to walk away and say, I got a fatwa that life insurance is permissible. That's not what I'm sitting here to do. By the way, fatwa, fatwa itself, like when you get fatwa, it's supposed to be specific to you uniquely as a person. Fatwa is like, there are some fatwas that you can issue and say this applies to all of you. Okay, this applies to all of you. There's some fatwas you can do that. Generally in fatwa, what we're taught, and this is how the Prophet ﷺ did it. Multiple people would come to him. Somebody would say, "What's the best deed?" And the Prophet ﷺ would be like, "Go in jihad." Somebody else would come, "What's the best deed?" "Control your anger." Sometimes, "What's the best deed?" "Be good to your parents." Is he just randomly giving answers to 3 different people? No. He wasn't randomly giving answers. He knew this person has an issue with their anger. He knew this person has older parents. This would be the best deed for them. This person's younger. They should be engaged in jihad. So fatwa is always unique to a person. So we are going to issue a general fatwa. It is going to have conditions. It's going to have certain restrictions, inshallah. And it will discuss the details of life insurance. And I'm looking forward to that so that people can look at that and don't just go for the yes and no, but what applies to me, what type of insurance works. Inshallah, we will detail this out. But there are other bodies who've issued fatwas as well. So maybe if the European Fatwa Council, Europe's very similar to America, their fatwas are generally very similar to what we need here. If there's other bodies that have issued such fatwas, we can follow those as well. We probably shouldn't follow the fatwas that are very different than ours. If we're living in a majority Muslim country, their rulings don't apply to us. I'm sorry, and our rulings don't apply to them. And so we do need something that's specific to Muslim minorities living in, let's call it the West. US, Canada, England, I don't know, does Australia count as West? But they're like us, okay? So all of these countries, like we need to have sort of the same type of methodology. So inshallah, that should be coming in the coming weeks, that fatwa.
I'm just going to make a simple comment so you understand why is it the majority take the position haram. Conventional insurance, you pay a premium, you transfer the risk to the insurance company. So that, from an Islamic law perspective, becomes an issue of gambling and uncertainty and risk. There is life insurance that's Sharia compliant, and it's called takaful. Takaful insurance is sharing the risk. So there is nothing haram about all of us here agreeing to put $100 a month each and own a fund, that's the Tarbiya fund, and if any one of us gets injured or passes away, all of us that had made that contribution, we would take an amount, 100,000, and we would give it to the injured. We shared the risk with our membership. So takaful was the birth of insurance to begin with. So most of insurance, the birth of insurance started in commercial insurance, insuring ships that were doing trade, and it was this mutual takaful insurance. There is takaful insurance in most Muslim countries. We don't have takaful insurance in the United States. There are some mutual companies that could be somewhat similar, but ultimately we don't have a fully compliant life insurance company in the US. That's why we need to look outside of the box, and the fiqh scholars like Shaykh Umer working on finding those dawabit, those restrictions, to make it permissible. So yes, it depends, and for our circumstances here, in a lot of circumstances of all of us living here, there are situations where this term life insurance becomes really urgent to protect our family. And protecting our family is also one of the maqasid al-shar'iyya. And I think the fatwa that will be issued will probably give us some guidance and allow our financial advisors like Brother Shakeb to pick the insurance that's workable for our cases.
Yes, brother.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
I do really appreciate, having such kind of experts in that field. And I'm a founder of a non-profit that serves refugees and new immigrants. And I'm interested in generating revenue from the stocks. But I have a concern, and this concern is actually not just mine, but some community members, dealing with any kind of Islamic financial institution in the West here, where whatever methodology we come up with on our front, meaning dealing between us and the Islamic institutions, the Islamic institutions built here, they are sitting on a cushion of the government rules here and the financial system that is actually in this country. So there has to be a bridge between you and the system and you and us. My question is, or the concern is, when you deal with the Muslims, you might be dealing with 100% compliance process and methodology. But your relationship with the system here, how this is actually applied from compliance with Sharia as well. So, and I would just like to see if that's something that you can shed light on it to secure the understanding that dealing with the Islamic institutions is fully 100% risk-free, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair.
Start that off.
Thank you for that question. So
Repeat the question.
the question was, how does a nonprofit or an Islamic entity here in U.S. kind of bridge the gap with the U.S. laws and that compatibility?
Not the nonprofit, how the Islamic institutions dealing with the rules of the land here when they actually, they deal with the laws of financial transactions. For example, just a hypothetical example, you deal with, with an institution, financial institutions. So how your relationship with them is actually built.
Like as community members, you deal with Islamic institutions that might be tainted by default because they have to deal with a non-Islamic system.
Oh, I understand.
Yeah.
So how do you develop trust? How does the Muslim community trust working with Islamic institutions that could potentially be tainted simply by having to comply with a non-Islamic system?
Do you want to address it?
Jazakallah khair. I mean, I say that there's two aspects to answer this question. Number one is personal responsibility, which you as a Muslim, as a community leader, as a founder of an organization, you have a responsibility to verify, whether or not the institution that you're working with, let's say like, Sharia compliant lending, for example, as one example of many, you have a responsibility to study, and because again, we talked earlier about ta'atullah azza wa jalla. You have to find ways to be obedient to Allah azza wa jalla, to comply by Islamic rules. So you have to do your homework, right? But additionally, I think we also have to trust that many of those institutions also have scholars, also have their own efforts and their own research and their own studying that's going on. So we should not always just reinvent the wheel. So sometimes it suffices to look at their Sharia board, for example, and realize, okay, they have really credible scholars, with the right types of credentials. And I'm an engineer, and there's only so much I can do as far as research goes. So I'm gonna go ahead and trust their model. This way you've done your part, but ultimately you're delegating part of that responsibility to the scholars that have issued them their fatwas. So I think that would be a way to mitigate the situation. Allah ta'ala.
Completely agree with that. I mean, as the average Muslim, Allah does not expect you to become an expert in everything. Just like you don't become an expert in medicine or an expert in law or an expert in accounting. We all go to professionals, right? But there are, I think, the point I want to make here is when there's a will, there's a way. I've seen a lot of people give up. I see people say, you know what, I want to get into real estate investing, but I don't know how to do it without leverage. I think you have to go get a loan from a bank somehow, and that's the only way to deal with it. I'm starting this new business where I'm selling hijabs, and from the time that I get the inventory till the time that I need to, that I actually get the revenue from the customers, there's a gap. And I need to buy a lot of inventory. I don't know how to raise working capital. I'm selling on Shopify. I'm just going to get inventory financing from Shopify, and I'm going to pay the interest rate of whatever, 16% for that. I am starting a private equity business. It has to be based on leverage. I have to get a bank involved, right? And in all of these cases, alhamdulillah, I'm excited. I'm really excited to see what our youth have been working on. I'm giving you examples. These are real examples of real companies I'm working with. So many entrepreneur real estate developers have come to me and said, I want to form a fund where we collect money from 20 people in the community, 50,000, 50,000, 50,000, we collect that money, and we're gonna buy a property and we're gonna rent it out and we're gonna share the profits. Because not everyone can go out and buy $1 million property anyway. But I am an expert in real estate, I'm gonna go find the investors, we're gonna collect the money, we're all gonna make some money, and I'm gonna take an extra 1% off top there. And so so many people I've worked with on real estate funds, building them through musharaka structures, mudaraba structures, so on. 100% halal, ethical, and it doesn't have to be, Imam Azeez, he made a point earlier, this is not just about Islamic principles. Islam and ethics, you made a point as well, fiqh itself. Fiqh defines the boundaries. People have worried a lot about fiqh. Is this haram, is this halal, is this black, is this white? Islam is not black and white. Allah did not ask us to become black and white. Fiqh defines the boundaries. Beyond this point is haram, okay? But do you always want to go to the boundary all the way up to haram and then not do the haram? Right? Like, there's a reason we have sunnah prayers, so that we protect our fard, right? And so we want to be as ethical as possible. And so Islamic finance, for example, is supposed to be ethical finance. It's not supposed to be just attractive to Muslims, it's attractive to everybody. Riba, by the way, interest, isn't just prohibited in Islam, it's prohibited in Christianity. It was prohibited in Judaism. Allah criticized the Jews in the Quran. وَأَكْلِهِمُ الرِّبَا. They used to take, and they still take interest, even though they were prohibited not to. The Greeks said this was evil. The Romans said this was evil. The Babylonians, throughout history, everyone thought interest is evil. Now it's become a Muslim thing only, right? But it's the ethical thing to do. It's the right thing to do. It's the fair and the just thing to do, right? You explained this earlier about insurance. Why is insurance a problem? Because you're transferring risk. You can't just transfer risk. You have to transfer risk with the benefit of the risk. You have to keep the risk with the benefit of the risk. So we have real estate funds. We have a new private equity company, Muslim private equity company, that's going out and buying businesses. 100% halal. The way they're raising the money, working capital. We've built a mudaraba structure. They don't have to give equity away. They're raising that through 100% halal. Inventory financing, 100% halal. We have means to do this. And we know how to do this within the law. And by the way, we can do all of this while taking advantage of the law. I explained the tax benefit of stocks earlier, right? Mm-hmm. Private equity. Everyone in private equity takes benefit of QSBS. Is the ability to go buy a business, own it for 5 years, sell it off at a big profit, and you don't pay any tax. Right? We know how to do those types of things within an Islamic framework. So we can take advantage of 83B, QSBS, all the good stuff that venture capital, private equity, businesses, all these stuff that people enjoy in haram ways, we can do it in halal ways. We do have to continue to educate ourselves, work harder, be knowledgeable about both the legal side, take advantage of that, and the Islamic side. And so people in the industry, alhamdulillah, are doing these things, and we should have optimism, and then we should just really try hard to find the experts, and the experts are there, inshallah. I'm very optimistic. I'm so excited to see the little startup companies that our youth are engaged in, that are really growing up to be the future of what I will call ethical finance. I don't have to call it Islamic finance. Exactly. Ethical finance, and what's going on in this country, what's going on in England. It's exciting. It's exciting. It really energizes me to see what people are doing.
He has his hand up for a long time.
Third time, yeah.
Yeah. No, you Inta. You have a question.
Yeah. Me, right?
Yes.
Yeah, two questions. One to Sheikh Umer and the other to you, Brother Abed. First, both related to inheritance. So, the inheritance in the U.S., if I have a boy and a girl, I got into a very long argument with my daughter, who's a PhD student, who would not accept that she would get half of what her brother would get. What would be the best argument? Of course, she would not accept that this is the way it is, and Islam says that. And could this be handled through wasiyatun yusa biha? Can I just do wasiyah that both will split the inheritance even? Second question to you, Brother Abed. I've done my wasiyah, my will and trust years ago with my company. It was through an American lawyer, should I redo it now under Sharia ways?
Yes. And I'll explain exactly what you need to do on that. Do you want to answer the inheritance question?
Sure. So the question was about the inheritance for men versus women, and some women struggling with the idea of why are women getting less. And the question was, can that be resolved through the wasiyah, because up to 1/3 of your wealth you can make, you can have some choice in that matter, right? So Allah says, Allah has basically defined all of the fractions for you, but then He gives us permission for 1/3 we can do what we like. However, I'll answer that part first. The 1/3 still has some restrictions on it. And one of those restrictions in the 1/3 is that you cannot use it to give money to someone who's already eligible to receive under the fraction. So you can't change the fractions effectively. So no, the 1/3 cannot be used to give more to your daughter compared to your son. The question becomes, I think people, how do I explain this? There's multiple levels at which we can understand this issue. The first one is, if people get hung up on this idea of son versus daughter, but if you study those two verses, Yusikumullah, the verse and the verse that comes after, effectively most of inheritance is in these two verses, and then some more beyond that, but most of inheritance is covered in these two verses. If you go through all the analysis and do all of the fractions, you will find cases where men and women get equal. You will find cases where the woman gets more, and you will find cases where the woman gets less. So, do women have a problem when they get more? Do men have a problem when the women get more? Right? Why are we just looking at that one aspect and we're like, this is the one we have an issue with? This is not Allah being against women. You know, that's not going to happen. There are many cases where women get more. And so if we need to go through and really study and understand. Now, the way that Allah has structured the system, Allah is Al-Hakim. He's all-wise. And ultimately, that's what we need to understand, because there's so many things we don't understand in this life. I mean, I ask my kids this question: do you think life is fair? And they're like, oh, they're thinking about what's the right answer. And like, yeah, life is fair. I'm like, no, of course life is not fair. How can life be fair? Some people have more wealth, some people have more health, some people have this test, some people have that test. It's all over the place. And then you look at Hitler, and he did all these bad things, and he just died, and nothing's going to happen to him. Nothing happened in this life. Fir'aun lived a pretty, decent life, it seems like. So the only thing that makes things fair for us Muslims, alhamdulillah, is we have akhirah. So akhirah is what makes everything fair, right? But anyway, life is not fair, but why did Allah give each one of us different tests? He gave us different capabilities, different DNA, different parents, different environments. Everything's different. He's testing us all in a different way because He's Al-Hakim. As a part of that, Allah knows the role of a man and the role of a woman. And they're not the same. I'm sorry, they're not the same, right? A man cannot have a baby. So I know people are getting upset at Meta right now because they removed feminine hygiene products from the male bathrooms. Okay? So people are upset over there. So that's the world that we're living in right now. But let's kind of come back to the role of the man and the role of the woman is different. And based on that, Allah knows the system. He created us. He knows us. He designed us, right? He knows how to make these relationships work between a man and a wife, between a father and a daughter, and a father and a son, and a mother and a daughter, and all of these relationships. And so the scholars actually, if you want to, you can go and pick up some books and do some searching. They'll try and explain, because some rules that Allah put in place, our aql can grasp them, and some rules that Allah put in place, our aql will not grasp them. Right? This idea of when you wipe over your socks, you wipe on the top, right? Why? Isn't the bottom that gets dirty, but we wipe on the top? So aqlan, from our intellect, we think we're so smart, we just can't seem to figure that out. Why wipe on the top? Why not wipe on the bottom? So some things we're not going to understand. Why is Maghrib 3 rak'ah? Yet scholars have strived to try to explain why is Maghrib 3 rak'ah. They've made attempts to explain this stuff. So if you go and you will find books that will explain. Then we'll try and explain why is it 1/6 here and 1/8 here, and why does the woman get more here, why does the man get more here? Because the man has the responsibility for the children here, but the woman doesn't have this responsibility. And if we had a fully functioning society, which worked properly, by the way, like when there's a case of divorce, it shouldn't be that the woman is left unmarried, right? Like ideally she should get married again. If we had a fully functioning society, all of these things, if we take the Sharia as a whole, all of it works right. It all just works. It's beautiful because Allah built it. There's no other option. It is beautiful. The most beautiful built it. It has to be beautiful, right? So we can find explanations for this. So I'm not going to go through all the fractions and explain why this, why this, why that. But to some extent, it boils down to we just have to trust Allah. Also, keep in mind, there's a couple of points I want to make as addendums. Number one, in your lifetime, you can choose to give as much as you want to your son and daughter. So you can choose to give them equal. You can choose to give your daughter more. By the way, this is a question I get asked: is like, do I have to give all my kids exactly equal?
Not in your lifetime.
So who says you have to give all kids equally? Only one person. Okay. What? Who says you don't have to give equally? Let's see. Are people participating? Wow, you're so unfair. Why wouldn't you give equally? Do we treat all our kids? This is a very go ahead, please.
In your life, you should give equally to all the children, but whatever the distribution comes from Allah, it comes after the death.
Okay. So one answer was give equally. But the thing is, for anyone who's been a parent, you know your kids are not the same. You know, this is something I learned the very hard way. I thought my first son, you know, he grew up and like, okay, learned some techniques, finally, like, he's the experiment, right? We're like learning how to parent on him. Then my daughter is born and like, my God, she is not the same. The same tricks don't work. She's not the same person. Her personality's different. Everything's different about her. So should I treat them the same? And then I have another son and he's a different personality. Should I treat him the same as my first son? That would be unfair. So as a parent, our job is to learn, as a boss is the same, as a teacher is the same, as an imam is the same. You know what needs each person has. What weaknesses do they have? And you want to help them improve with those weaknesses. What strengths do you have? How do you capitalize on those strengths? So you don't treat all your children the same, right? So they don't all necessarily will get the same amount of money. Some may have needs that others don't have. But in your lifetime, you can distribute money to your children. That's one point. The second point is, I think in Sharia you've built a capability where you can make like a recommendation, right, to the sons to say, hey, listen, like, you know, if you choose to, you can give some extra to your sibling sister. Now, that should never be forced, right? Because that takes, again, you're trying to break Allah's law down. That should never be forced. But you can have this conversation if you like. You can have the conversation privately with your son and say, hey, like, what do you think about this? What do you want to do? And then it's their choice. But it's something that you can recommend. But it's something I would suggest that you have a private conversation if this is something that you're interested in doing. Don't ever like force it or encourage, you know, like don't. It's not your money at that point. Keep that in mind. When you pass away, this is not your money. And so Allah will choose where it goes, right? But you can have the conversation when you're alive and figure out how you want to handle that. And Allah knows best.
La wasiya liwarith is the hadith that says that if any person is a taker, is going to receive an inheritance from the fractions, you can't leave a wasiya. In Fiqh al-Ja'fari, the Shi'i law allows you to leave up to 1/3 to your wife, to your daughter, to whomever you wish. All Sunni Muslim countries have codified la wasiya liwarith except Egypt. In Egypt, you are permitted under their personal status code to leave 1/3 to your spouse if you wished. As the Shaykh said, during your lifetime, you can give extra to your wife. What we do with clients who are very strict about this particular issue is you are able to create a waqf in your lifetime. So for example, if you create the waqf is considered something you do in your lifetime. So you can say 80% of it goes to my daughter and 20% to my son. You can do that. You can give them equal, you can give them separate, because the waqf is the manfa'a, only the profit. When that waqf terminates, then the Islamic rules of inheritance apply on the distribution. So some clients would create a waqf, and the waqf will go on for 50 years. It'll be distributed equally to the children, but when it terminates, then the principal, the corpus, whatever is left, is going to be distributed according to the Islamic inheritance rules. as it pertains to your existing trust. Estate plans are plans that we create, assuming or saying, La samah Allah. Today, one thing that freaked me out from a brother says, this is your prayer, like this is your last. Now I'm worried I'm going to die on my way back to San Francisco while I'm driving. So you do your estate plan thinking that you're going to pass away tomorrow. But if you don't pass away tomorrow, in a couple of years, that's a working document. So you're going to adjust it. You're going to update it. You're going to modify it. You did this many years ago. So we got to take a look at it and say, you know, maybe I need to restate it. The trust does not terminate. We don't do a new one that cancels this. What we would do, you could do this on Sharia Wiz, or you can do it as with a lawyer. You will be restating the trust. So the new trust that you're going to create that will be Sharia compliant will supplant, replace, cancel the old one. So it'll be updated according to what's happening in your life right now. So that's the way to address it. And as the Shaykh Umer also said, on Sharia Wiz, I had this there's a very famous magazine called Worth. And it's a financial magazine. They get letters from their readers. So somewhere about 12, 13 years ago, they get a letter from a very well-seasoned finance person. He says, my dad is very wealthy. He's got a lot of money. And now he's become very religious. And he wants to give my sister half of what I'm going to get in inheritance. I want my sister to receive equal. But I don't want to offend my father's religious sensibilities. What do I do? So he writes this letter to Worth. You know, so Worth looks for an Islamic expert. They find me and say, can you answer this question? So of course I answer the question in explaining that yes, she can receive half. And if he consents to have his sister receive equal, that's valid. But the scholars have agreed that the consent has to take place after the father passes away. So what we do in Sharia is we ask you the question, do you want your son and your daughter to receive equal? And if you say yes, there'll be an article in your will that would say, son, I told you in my lifetime, I want you to share equally with your sister, but you're not obligated to. I just hope that you do that. But under Islamic law, you don't have to consent, and it's just my recommendation. And then you leave it to your son. So you have many solutions. As the Shaykh said, talk with your son, give her money in your lifetime. I have a client now who just dedicated a bank account and gave it to his daughter so that it will equalize the inheritance in his lifetime. So you have a lot of solutions. The Sharia is very flexible, and it allows a lot of fluidity to work with, to anchor it in the moral spirit.
I want to add a last point, which might ruin the answer, but I do want to add the point, is that my personal recommendation is to follow the fractions as they are. So my strong personal recommendation is to let the son have twice as much as the daughter, because you're leaving it in Allah's hands. And this is something that it's a Quranic injection, and that was the verse I was quoting, tilka hududullah. Like these are the rules that, if you look at the Quran, when you read the Quran, it doesn't come across as a book of halal and haram. When you generally read the Quran, Allah hardly uses, every once in a while, something like that. Allah will say, or He will say, like, this is haram or something, but it's very rare. Allah's style is like, this is khayrul lakum, this is good for you, and this is sharrul lakum, this is bad for you. Because when someone tells you, haram, haram, it's like, oh man, like, now I want to do it, So Allah's style is a very gentle style, and Allah's style is one where He loves to encourage us, and He's telling us, you know what, this is khayrul lakum. When someone tells you this is good, drink some water. Why? It's good for you, man. Just drink it because it's good for you. It makes you want to drink it. Of course, I want to do something that's good for me. So that's Allah's style. That's the style of the Prophet ﷺ as well. Rarely would he say something like, haram. Like that wasn't his style. And so when Allah mentions like here, tilka hududullah, these are the limits, right? And he uses some very strong wording. we should pay a little bit extra attention. Why did Allah use stronger language, right? And so, again, so these are all, we have many, many, many options. Do whatever you like in your lifetime because Allah put no restrictions on that. But when it comes to death, my personal recommendation is just let the fractions work as they work. There's some wisdom behind it that we may or may not understand, but man, it's Allah. If we're not going to trust Allah, then we cannot trust anyone.
This is a really important point. So I'm actually glad that we are analyzing it further and further. This affects so many parents in the community, and it will affect any will or any living trust that you end up writing, and your kids are going to see that. And so we have to be perfectly honest with ourselves as we proceed. And I feel like, you know, we need to provide the Shari'i response, but also there is a philosophical approach as well. Because sometimes we get caught up in the notion of, I just want vanilla ice cream with Oreos. If I can't have that, I'm gonna throw a tantrum, right? Sometimes you just have to zoom out a little bit and look at the bigger picture and understand what's going on. Instead of getting caught up, because if we allow, I think, this approach of, there is that one particular injunction of God that I don't like and I don't appreciate, I mean, this could be applied to anything. I love everything about Islam, I just don't like the tedious daily prayers. Do I have to do that? Right. Can I just do everything else except that? Do we want to open that door? I like everything about Islam except hijab. You know, men could start complaining that they're not allowed to wear silk, or they're not allowed to wear gold, or that they have to be the breadwinners of the family, or that they have to be, strong and to defend their families. There is always something about Sharia that we may or may not accept because of the weakness of our minds and the weakness of our faith. But I think we need to always lean back on the question, what is the alternative? If you don't take Islam in its entirety as a package, including the parts of it that may not sit very well with your modern sensibilities, then let's examine the alternative. What is the alternative? The alternative is to become a Christian? If you have 3 unanswered questions as a Muslim, you're going to end up with 75 difficult questions that you're not going to answer. What is the alternative? Is to leave Islam altogether and to become an atheist? I think that many of us, they exist in that comfortable space where we're Muslim by name, but at the same time, we don't have enough energy to actually commit to taking Islam with the utmost seriousness. And that's not God's problem. That's not the Imam's problem, right? And certainly it's not a parent's problem. You do what you can, in order to raise your kids on the path of Islam. But these are the boundaries that I don't want to suffer in my grave having done something disobedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in order to please that human being. Maybe my daughter doesn't accept that today, it's fine. She didn't accept so many things when I was raising her, right? And I just had to put my foot down and do it because I felt it's the right thing to do. And after I die, years later, maybe my daughter will realize, alhamdulillah, that I was not entangled in anything haram. I think that should be our approach, as opposed to the notion, oh no, we can find a solution. There is a solution. Sharia is flexible. We can find a workaround. That should not be the spirit. The spirit should not be attempting to find workarounds, but rather, this is the boundary. And it is the ultimate khayr for humanity. And it was applied for thousands of years. And it produced nothing but good. And because I exist in some cultural framework that dictates otherwise, this is all temporary. And it's definitely not, it's very fleeting. And sooner or later, this very culture that we worry about so much is going to evolve and change into something else and something else and something else. The one immutable thing is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the one thing that should not change.
Just one final point to add to that. What does Islam mean?
Submit, surrender.
Sorry?
Submission.
Peace? Somebody said peace? Yeah, so peace is salam, not Islam. Islam is masdar from aslama yuslim. It means to submit. The process of when someone becomes a Muslim, the process we're supposed to go through is first we go through Iman. Iman is when we're like trying to figure out like what's going on, right? So we have these ayat of Allah in the Quran. We have ayat all around us, the rain, the trees, like all the ocean, everything. We look at all of this, we realize there must be Allah. We go through that whole process, we get to Iman, we figure out the pillars, we figure all of that out. Once you've got to that conclusion, you've come to that Iman, now you know like, oh my God, this is real. There's Allah, He sent prophets and messengers, and we have Quran, we have all of this. At that point, there's no choice, rationally, logically, because I know we love our brains nowadays, right? Intellectually, there's no choice but to say, we have to have Islam. And at that point, we have to submit. And it doesn't matter if we don't understand. You know, the rational part of it is actually the Iman part. That's the part where we have to sit there and go like, oh wow, there must be a creator. There must be a creator. There must be Allah. There must be that's the part where you use your brain. Once you've come to the conclusion that Islam is it, you have to just submit. There's no choice left. So whether you understand a particular hukum of Islam or you don't understand it, whether we understand or we don't understand it, we have to accept it at that point. That is the fundamental, that's the name of the religion. It's not just the name of the religion, this is what Ibrahim alayhi salam did. This is what Allah praises him for in the Quran, right? So this isn't just Islam isn't like unique to Muslims, by the way, right? This was the religion of Ibrahim alayhi salam. The Jews of that time, they were the Muslims of their time, the Christians at their time were the Muslims of their time, and we're now the Muslims of now, right? So the fundamental point here is that we should submit, whether we understand or don't understand.
I have a follow-up.
Can maybe Brother Abdullah, you talk Shaykh Umar after, so we can take some more questions. So Shabana?
With the living will and the trust and all of that, I understand nowadays what happens. Historically, what happened when somebody passed away? If you don't have the living will, whose responsibility does it become to make sure that wealth is distributed?
There's no way to enforce it. So the bottom line is, if you die,
like morally speaking,
if you die without a will or without a trust, you die intestate. And when you die intestate in the state of California, you, in a community property state, the survivor is going to receive the vast majority of the assets of surviving spouse. If you are in equitable distribution states, sometimes 100% goes to the survivor. In New Jersey, for example, if you pass away and you have kids only from the surviving spouse gets 100% of the assets. There is no one who's responsible to distribute except the person who gets everything. So it would mean that the person in New Jersey, the wife, let's say, that's a survivor, she gets 100% of everything. If she is going to apply the Sharia, then she would take her money and she would distribute it according to the Sharia. But that usually doesn't happen. So without having a will or trust, that means your estate is going to be distributed according to secular state law, and you have no control over it. The same thing on who's going to be appointed as the executor. In that case, the surviving spouse is usually the one that is in line, whether husband or wife. All assets, if you're in a will that are in your husband's name and he passes away, you will not have access to, unless your name's on those accounts, until the court orders. So all assets of a decedent are frozen until court orders are issued, appointing the executor and the administrator who's going to go and take care of everything. And all of that will be under the supervision of the court. And a lot of people will have to hire a lawyer generally to help them through the process.
I think I understand what Sister
Savannah, I think she's asking who's morally responsible of distributing the wealth in the event that the deceased did not leave a will. And I think that religious responsibility falls on the heirs. They have to make sure that they're not getting something that is not theirs. And so they can't just simply resort to state law and say, well, we live in California, I'm just going to follow the laws. If they're able, if they're capable legally to distribute the wealth between each other in a manner that is compatible with Sharia, then they would be religiously obligated to do so. And that was your question.
Yeah, but that's the person who receives it. and there's going to be a lot of taxable implications.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Because at this point there's no step-up basis that the Shaykh was talking about, because now it's going to be a gift that you're going to give to them.
Yeah.
If they are, depends on which classes of people. Like if you're leaving money to your kids, generally there's no inheritance tax, there's no issues. But sometimes if you leave it to a third party like a sibling, that may implicate inheritance tax in some states. It does implicate inheritance tax, for example, in New Jersey. I have a situation here, and this happens in our community, that your brother just moved to Sacramento and you gave him $300,000, or you know what, his credit is horrible. I'm putting the house in my name. Well, now your brother passes away and the house is in his name. How are you going to get the house? So now the heirs, if there's no will, if there's nothing specifically saying that that house is really my brother, it's not our house. And now if we're going to transfer it to the brother, now it's going to be a taxable event of some sort. It's $1 million home that you're gifting for what type of consideration? So the estate planning, doing your will and organizing, it organizes all your financial affairs and clears all the ambiguities and the potential uncertainties, acknowledging, like Imam Azeez said, that there were some scholars even in the pre-modern times saying that the wasiya was a requirement and obligatory if you owed anybody money. Because that's the case, you pass away and you did not acknowledge that you owe Brother Shakeb his 50,000. Now Brother Shakeb is not getting his 50,000, and now I'm going to be held accountable before the Creator that I just stole his money and I didn't pay a debt. I died and my estate did not pay a debt. So there's more than just financial reasons to put together your estate plan. You don't want state law to control, and especially if you want privacy. You want privacy, you get a trust. You avoid probate, everything is private, there's no freezing of your assets. So that's when clients come to me, especially if they own a real estate, we recommend, if it's complex, pay me the $4,000, I'll do your estate plan. But seems like it's not that complicated. You have a couple of bank accounts, you have a residence. Instead of spending thousands on the lawyer, go to Sharia Wiz and you can do it for $4.99 or $7.99. Now what happens, everything is private. You did it in your lifetime. You pass away, your husband takes over, nothing changes because all the assets are in the name of the trust. No court, no issues. Then the survivor passes away, same thing. No court, no probate. You put the successor trustee as your daughter. Your successor trustee is your son. He looks at all of the assets, distributes them according to the terms and conditions that are in the trust. So it keeps everything private, saves you thousands of dollars in attorney's fees, time, effort. The time you're grieving the death of your parent shouldn't be the time that now you're struggling to find a lawyer and go to a surrogate court.
May I ask a question? I can speak on behalf of the people. So let me ask a question it's a legal question. So in cases where someone passed away and that person wrote the will, and the will distributes the wealth in accordance with Islamic law.
Yeah.
But then after he passed away, let's say that his spouse, for example, in a community property state such as ours, decided to litigate
the will.
Decided to reject the will and decided to litigate. What are the courts inclined to do in situations like this?
Sure. First, the Sharia Wiz platform, again, I practiced for 25 years as a lawyer, and I've testified as an expert in courts 70 times. I have cases in England, in Canada, all over the states. I'm the leading authority on the role of Sharia in courts, in American courts. I brought that expertise in drafting the models for Sharia Wiz to protect, to make sure that the Sharia Wiz Islamic will are valid in a California and in a state court. Because if the will simply says, when I die, I want everything to be according to the Sharia, that will not be enforceable in a court of law. The judge would set it aside because courts in the United States are not authorized because of the First Amendment to interpret or enforce religious law. So the way that it will be enforceable is that you have to divest the court from the authority to interpret or enforce the terms of what's in your will. So our drafting makes it clear is that when I pass away, I want my will distributed according to Islamic law as follows. Here are the fractions, 1, 2, 3, 4. These are my survivors at the time I sign this will. In the event something changes, when I pass away, my Islamic heirs are different, I authorize my trustee or I authorize my executor exclusively to recalculate all of these shares and determine who my Islamic heirs are according to the schedule of Islamic inheritance attached and made part hereof. So we have an entire schedule of all the Islamic inheritance attached to your will. That provides you the validity. Now, you could disinherit everybody under US law. You could leave all your money to your cat shelter. But you cannot disinherit your wife. That's the only restriction in this country. Your children, your parents, doesn't matter. But you can't disinherit your wife. So what happens is that a wife has what's called an elective share in most states.
Wife or husband, right?
Or husband, yes. But we're always assuming it's the husband with the money. You know, we're always assuming that. In my practice now, it seems that the wives have more money than the husbands. More Muslim women. In my practice, I represented primarily Muslim women. And in my practice, they were physicians, engineers, doctors. And we would have cases. I had this really crazy case where she was a lawyer and she married a deadbeat. 7, 8 years in the marriage, she says, you know, I'm leaving. This is not working. I'm the lawyer. I'm spending money. So we go to court. He's Muslim. He asks for alimony, and under New Jersey law, he's entitled to alimony. We had to buy his alimony right out for 50 grand. And when we went to court, when we put the divorce through, the guy started crying. He had a really good time. You know, he did nothing, and he had all this, you know, free overhead and sponsorship and support and travel and maintenance. And now he's out of luck. So my clients are like, why am I paying? Under the Sharia, he has to pay me. I don't have to pay him. So now back to the inheritance, the issue. So if you receive less than what you're entitled to under state law, which would be in most states the elective share, which could be up to 1/3. If you receive less than that, you can contest the will and receive your elective share against your 1/8. So this happens sometimes. The Sharia addresses this issue 2 ways. One, there's a waiver that both parties sign. If it's a will in California, you're going to have a community property state agreement, and that will address this particular issue. And if the spouses sign it voluntarily without any coercion, that would be sufficient for the will to be enforced and enforcing Islamic law. But a disclaimer, Sharia is not a law firm. Sharia is a self-help. It was built by lawyers, built by Islamic law experts, but you have to do your own work to save the money. So that's what happens all the time. You sign that waiver, then that will be a way that the spouse is not going to contest it at court. Or if you do a joint trust, there's no reason to contest because the surviving spouse is the one in management and control of the marital estate until the passing of the survivor. So that's also another piece.
Guys, can you keep the follow-up questions to our speakers, inshallah, after the event? So that we can... Sorry?
Another question for the other speaker.
Can just to diversify the questions, I know, Sister, please forgive me.
Totally diversified.
Forgive me. I mean, he said that most of his clients are women anyway.
I'm representing.
But please, go ahead.
I want to change the topic.
So hold on. Sister Shivana is going to ask her question.
Just from a
She's for you.
standpoint, commingling of finances in terms of the distribution later and the joint bank account, and if the wife is earning and the husband's earning, is it against
No, it's not. Let me give you a story. In the fiqh in al-fiqh al-maliki, these scholars created a legal concept called al-kad wa si'aya. And the concept of al-kad wa si'aya is about effort and work. And this situation came to these scholars that Muslim women in North Africa area were the ones who were carrying a huge burden in the farming and in the work. So they would do all the work, and they're not getting compensated for it because they're married. So in the event of a death or in the event of the divorce, those women felt that they had contributed to the acquisition and were not compensated for it, and that wasn't fair. So one scholar took a hadith, not from the Prophet, but a hadith from Umar ibn al-Khattab, Amir al-Mu'mineen, that we call him al-Faruq, the Just. There was a very famous Muslim woman in Mecca that was a famous dressmaker. She worked all day, all night, making the dresses. Her husband would take them the following day to the souk and sell them. And they made a lot of money. They had no children. He passed away. Strictly speaking, from the Sharia inheritance rules, she would get a quarter because there were no children, and 3/4 were going to be distributed to the paternal line. She went to Amir al-Mu'mineen and said, "You know me, I'm the one working day and night doing this. Is this fair kind of a distribution?" He said, "I know who you are. Of course, half of it is already yours because you work to acquire it." Back to the point of commingling and working together. So he flipped the formula, gave her half because it was her work and effort that contributed with her husband to acquire it, and gave her a quarter that was her inheritance. So in the Sharia, in the 7th century, there was a legal theory that a wife has a legal and equitable claim in the assets that are acquired based on her cooperation and contribution. This was not the law in the United States until the 1960s and 1970s. So this has been acknowledged, and the scholars called it al-kad wa si'aya as a concept. So yes, we even address this legal concept in Sharia Wiz. So in Sharia Wiz, you are asked, if you're the husband doing the will, do you want to acknowledge the contributions of your spouse? Has she worked? Has she commingled with you? Because if she did, you owe her that money. And if you owe her that money, you can acknowledge, I owe her 50,000, I owe her 100, or this house, 50% of it is hers. So at the time of death, she will receive that as a debt against the estate, plus 1/8 of the balance of what's remaining. So the Sharia is very equitable, and we addressed it from the 7th century. Sometimes we need more scholars to dig deeper and to come back and bring to the fore a lot more of these gender equitable theories that are inherent in the Sharia.
Yes. Just to add to that really quickly. So that was an example where the woman was contributing and earning, right? That makes the example simple. But to step back for a second and make it a more generic question. So can you have a joint account? Yes, you can have a joint account. The question becomes, how would that get distributed? Does it automatically get distributed 50? Does it automatically assume that 50% is the man's and 50% is the woman's? Not necessarily. So the point of part of the process of doing an estate plan is so that you fulfill the legal obligation. You want to avoid probate, you want to avoid certain taxes, you want to make sure you get the cost basis step up and all the legal stuff. Part of it also is to have that difficult conversation, or maybe it's not a difficult conversation, have that conversation with your spouse about, we have a joint bank account, but whose money is it? Is it 50-50? How do we think about this? Is it 50% yours, 50% mine? That's not a problem, right? It's not a problem to say that, but you have to explicitly state that and know that. You can't just assume, oh, I think 50% is mine. This is the problem that happens if a spouse passes away and you haven't had the conversation. Are you going to go to Allah and say well, I assumed it was 50% mine? It's a pretty big assumption. Have the conversation while you're alive, right? Have that conversation. And so it could be that you say, you know what, it's a joint bank account, but 10,000 belongs to one spouse and the rest of it is someone else's. It could be that it's a joint bank account for daily spending purposes, but actually all the money only belongs to one person. And so if they die, it's really one person's, even though it's a joint bank account. Or it could be that you decide it's 50-50, in which case it's fine, because both Islamically and legally, you can gift to your spouse as much as you like. Like, gifts between spouses are not even taxed. You know, there's this concept of gift tax, which, by the way, is commingled with estate tax. It's super complicated. You should know your gift tax and how that works. It's the giver of the gift who gives the tax. The whole thing's really messed up. But anyway, gift tax doesn't even apply between spouses. So all of that is very easy to work through. It's just a conversation with your spouse. Figure it out, make that clear as a part of your will and estate plan, and it's not a problem.
Who else is included, beside, your wife and your children, on your will, or estate planning? And how much do they get?
This is also another issue that we face a lot. If you only have daughters. So from an Islamic perspective, you and you're married, and you have a daughter and a son, and you got parents living. So the Sharia says that your parents are each going to receive 1/6, and your wife is going to receive 1/8, and the balance is going to be distributed double the share of the son compared to the daughter. But if you only have daughters, that's when siblings come into play. So if you have one daughter, she's going to receive half. If you have 2 or more daughters, they will receive 2/3 of the estate, but the balance will go to your siblings. And this has become an issue that I get questions all the time. My siblings live in Egypt. They live in Pakistan. They have nothing to do with my daughters. I want to leave everything for my daughter. Well, but the Sharia says, they would have to disclaim after you die, or you have to create a waqf in your lifetime. Now, that's the mainstream position. Again, I'm not a traditional scholar. He's the Shaykh. I'm a lawyer. We find solutions. There's a reading in the Quran that has been picking up momentum in al-Maghrib al-Arabi, because the perspective is that because you have a son, the son blocks siblings. So if you only had one son, he gets everything. Your brothers and sisters don't get anything. But if you only had a daughter, your siblings receive a share. A reading from Surah An-Nisa, chapter 4, I think it's verse 276 or 274. There's a discussion in the Quran about if a sister passes away, would a brother inherit from his sister if his sister had children? And children is used in a gender neutral state, male or female. And the Quran says if she has children, you don't inherit. Meaning that even if she had a daughter, it would block him. So some are using that reading to say if you only have daughters, they can get 100% of the estate and they block your siblings. This is a very minority site. The majority says no. The Ja'faris, the Shi'is, they take the position that a daughter would block. I always bring in the different perspectives so we better understand how other people address it too. But the mainstream position, and the position that I'm sure the Imam and the Shaykh agree, is that if you only have daughters, your siblings are going to take.
We have 5 more minutes, inshallah, you guys.
Yeah, the lawyers can always find loopholes. If you want to know, specifically for your situation, Sharia does have this kind of one of the cool things they have is they have a inheritance calculator, which is free on the website. Yeah. And so you can go in there, plug in, I have this many daughters, this many sons, I have a spouse, don't have a spouse, I have grandmothers, whatever. You can plug it all in, it'll tell you exactly what happens. So you can plug in everything, it'll give you the answer.
I have a question. So I always thought that as a Muslim woman, if you're working, your money belongs to you. You don't have to share it, right? So how would that work with the whole inheritance? Because
yeah.
I don't want to
we have 5 minutes left, so I think what we should do is quick questions, quick answers. What do you think? Yeah?
Yes.
Rapid fire. So that the question is, if a woman is working, does the money just belong to her? Like, why does she have to share it with anybody? No, it's your money. Even as a man, it's your money. Like, so when you earn money, whether you're a man or woman, the money is yours. However, you can have a moral responsibility upon you, a religious responsibility. So a man, for example, is responsible for taking care of his wife, for taking care of the children, for taking care of the parents. Similarly, a woman has a moral responsibility. If she doesn't have a husband, to take care of the children. And also, many scholars will say to take care of the parents. So it's obligatory upon you to take care of the parents. So yeah, it's your money. You choose what to do with it in your lifetime. But you do need to take care of certain people. And then when you pass away, you don't get a choice, right? So 1/3 you can dedicate to a cause, or someone who's not inheriting. The other Tarbiya. The rest of it, you don't get a choice. Allah's determined the fractions already, man or woman, it doesn't matter.
So I want to change the subject from inheritance to mortgage. I want to get guidelines from you. My son said that none of the Islamic mortgages are halal. And the reason is, if you are a mortgage licensed in America, most of them would sell the loan after that and be owned by different institutions. It doesn't say within the same company that you made a deal with. So I just want to quickly, the guidelines on this and what's considered
It's not going to be rapid fire.
Oh, he's the expert. He's the one who can answer that.
The question was, somebody said none of the Islamic mortgages in the US are halal. And the reasoning was most of them sell their mortgage back to Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae. And so fundamentally you're still dealing with a ribawi institution. Okay. So a couple of things. Number one, be very careful with words like all. Amin Housing Cooperative, for example, NIA, for example, do not sell to Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. I know that Guidance, UIF, Devon might, some organizations do, some don't. So don't use the word all. Nobody should use the word all. Very dangerous, especially when combined with the word halal or the word haram. Okay. This is another thing Allah spoke strictly about in the Quran, is that Allah declares halal, Allah declares haram. So we should be very careful. This is why the Hanafi madhab, and even Imam Ahmed, who was from the same area, effectively in Iraq, they would be very careful with words like halal and haram. They were like, let's use this other word, wajib maybe, because we're not so sure about it. Or we'll say like makruh, tahriman. We wouldn't call it haram. So be careful. But the quick answer is, okay, so number one, not all institutions do this. You will find some that do not do that, okay? That answers that part. Secondly, the ones that do this, our transactions, the way that we conduct transactions are between two people, right? The Prophet ﷺ would engage in transactions with the Jews, for example. Weren't they dealing with riba in the back end? They were, right? Our transaction, we deal with one party. It's party one and party two, right? We don't worry about what they're doing as a third party. When we negotiate a contract between two parties, we're responsible for our contract with that party. What they do with that is their responsibility. There's an institution called Devon Bank. Devon Bank is not even a Muslim company, right? How are they able to offer Islamic mortgages? Because in the back end, it's 100% haram, 100%. But what they're doing is they're doing this haram to halal conversion for you. They're offering you a contract that scholars have approved as this part's allowed because we'll make this part non-riba, we'll make that part riba. A Muslim bank couldn't even do that because they can't do the riba part. So a non-Muslim bank is actually able to do something that a Muslim bank would not be able to do. There are some issues with some Islamic mortgages that are in the details, okay? In the details that are not perfect, they're not ideal because it goes back to we're living in a non-Muslim country, how do we deal with this? Those issues, they're there, no doubt about it. But guess what? Aren't you dealing with a rental contract where you signed a contract that says if you pay your rent late, you're going to pay riba on it? You're going to pay a late fee? Don't we have credit cards that say if we don't pay on time, we're going to be paying interest on it? Don't you have an electricity bill that says if you don't pay it on time, there's going to be a late fee? That's riba, by the way. We're signing all these contracts all over the place that have problems. Our employment contracts have problems. All contracts that we're signing generally have some sort of problems in the US. So yes, some of these mortgage contracts also have problems. Do I like it? No, I don't like it. But they are not, you can't just say the riba. I think that's going a bit harsh and a bit extreme. We're working towards improving all of these things, inshallah, and make dua that we're able to improve them over time.
One more question, guys, from someone who has not asked before, please. Go ahead.
As employees, are there any tax credits that we can use
comes to donations or write-offs?
The question is, as employees, are there tax credits that we can use for donations and write-offs? So as employees, generally, you're getting a W-2 income, but the same applies if you're a 1099 NEC. You are able to, anytime that you give to a nonprofit, anytime you give a donation, that becomes a write-off. Goes on your Schedule A, you can itemize your deductions and you can take that as a tax credit. That's a very technical way to say it. Like basically you donate to a charity and you get a tax credit, okay? So that applies to everybody. That's the primary mechanism. The primary mechanism is to give to charity, and that's the way you get a tax credit, yeah.
This question impacting the whole community, very short. Why can't we start a takaful insurance program and allocate 10-15% for administration fees for a company like yours, Brother Shakeb, and enable the community to participate in the first Islamic insurance?
Great idea.
Repeat the question.
The question is why we can't create these institutions that can help solve some of these problems. So like the very first step, discussing and trying to investigate all of this history, you can imagine how the conversations goes when I talk to these three, right? So if you're overwhelmed today, imagine how I am with all this information and that I can provide it back to you, right? So these are my indirect board of advisors. Like, who's the advisor to the advisor? These guys. So that was the intent for today, is to kind of bring this level of awareness so you have these questions and concerns so you can start thinking about it. But there are, like you said, youth that are working on these type of initiatives and situations to see how we can make that happen, because past 20, 30 years, so many laws, so many things have changed and evolved that we are in that capacity or the ability to at least imagine it and to work with somebody to actually put those things in place. So for tonight, if you can, any other questions or any whatever concerns, please reach out. Reach out to us, reach out to our office, and we will facilitate this even more, right? We'll have more continued conversations and classes here.
We can do a more in-depth workshop.
Absolutely. This was just the very first step, and we had to get these guys here in front of you, and then the next step is just to keep this conversation going, because there is a lot of good stuff in the works.
The last thing from my perspective, that our motto and our philosophy at Sharia is three things: protect your family, preserve your wealth, fulfill your faith. That's exactly the moral, ethical lifestyle that the Sharia wants. Protect your family, preserve your wealth, fulfill your faith. That's what we're all about. That's what Sharia is about. That's why we're here today.
Thank you.
Takaful, the question was, why can't we do takaful? Who are the entrepreneurs? I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm not a legal expert. I just, advise on Sharia stuff. So, Abed, you're an entrepreneur. Shakeb, you're an entrepreneur. There's others in the audience. Do it. Yeah.
Okay, we can talk about it.
Inshallah. Just start with the dua.
Inshallah, we're going to conclude with the dua. Again, our speakers, inshallah, are going to stick around. Maybe don't overwhelm them with a ton of questions, but definitely do ask a few questions, inshallah, if you want to follow up on something that you've asked before. I know that many of you still have unanswered questions. This was the very first step, so don't get ahead of yourselves. اللهم لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك وعظيم سلطانك. اللهم صل على محمد النبي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. اللهم يا حنان يا منان يا بديع السماوات والأرض يا ذا الجلال والإكرام يا رب كل شيء ومليكا يا من له الأسماء الحسنى وصفات العلى، نسألك يا ربنا بكل اسم هو لك سميت به نفسك أو أنزلته في كتابك أو علمته أحدا من خلقك أو استأثرت به في علم الغيب عندك أن تجعل القرآن العظيم ربيع قلوبنا وذهاب همومنا وغمومنا وشفاء صدورنا. اللهم علمنا منه ما جهلنا وذكرنا منه ما نسينا وارزقنا تلاوته آناء الليل وأطراف النهار على النحو الذي يرضيك به عنا. اللهم اجعلنا ممن قرأ القرآن فيرقى ولا تجعلنا ممن ترك القرآن فيشقى. اللهم اجعلنا من أهل القرآن الذين هم أهلك وخاصتك يا رحمن. اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما واجعل تفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما. تجعل معنا ولا بيننا شقيا ولا محروما ولا مطرودا من رحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Almighty Allah, we celebrate your praises and we praise you and we thank you for the blessings that you have granted us and our families and loved ones. Ya Allah, we ask you to send peace and blessings upon the Prophet ﷺ and his family and descendants and companions and the righteous men and women that walk in his footsteps. Ya Allah, we ask you to forgive everyone in this room and their families and loved ones. Ya Allah, we ask you to elevate their stations, to strengthen their hearts, to increase their iman. We ask you to refine their health. Ya Allah, we ask you to clarify their sense of direction and purpose. And Ya Allah, we ask you that we always put you before our self-interest, that we put you before this dunya. Ya Allah, we ask you that you protect and preserve our families, our wealth, and our beautiful community. And Ya Allah, as you gather us here, we ask you that you send your blessings upon our beloved speakers that have come a long way in order to benefit this community with their knowledge. Ya Allah, we ask you to bless them with health and wealth and peace of mind. Allah, we ask you to put so much barakah in their lives and in their families. Ya Allah, we ask you that you take them home safe and sound. Ya Allah, as you gather us in this sacred house, we ask that you gather us in the highest level of your Jannah with the prophets and the messengers and the martyrs and the righteous. Allahumma ameen. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillah.